At the BRICS summit this October, BRICS nations discussed creating a new international payment system to challenge the dominance of the US dollar. On November 30th, US presidential-elect Donald Trump posted a strong warning on the social media platform Truth Social. He told the BRICS countries not to take drastic actions, or they would face 100% tariffs. Trump said, "The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar, while we stand by and watch, is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs, and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy." Trump added, "They could go find another sucker. There's no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America." Trump's warnings was aimed directly at BRICS countries, which originally formed from meetings between Russia, India, and China, later adding Brazil. In 2009, these four held their first summit, and the following year, China brought in South Africa, forming what's now called the BRICS 5. In 2022, China, still under the strict pandemic controls, held the BRICS presidency and suggested expanding the group. By 2023, at the Johannesburg summit, BRICS leaders agreed to invite 6 more countries, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, to join, with this decision taking effect on July 1st, 2024. However, before this change officially took place, Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, announced on December 29th that Argentina would not join BRICS, marking the first setback in the group's expansion. Saudi Arabia also had not formally joined yet. Other countries such as Turkey, Azerbaijan, Malaysia, and Thailand have applied to join BRICS, with some others showing interest as well. Thailand, in particular, has been called a double dealer by British media. Thailand is seeking membership in both BRICS and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, which includes 38 mostly Western, developed nations led by the US and Canada. In response to Trump's remarks, international affairs commentator Yue Shan noted that Trump's statement marked a shift from past US indifference. Similar to how he launched the trade war with China during his first term, reversing decades of Western appeasement of China, Trump's second term will focus on using tariffs in the US market as leverage in the ongoing currency war over the dollar's dominance. Yue Shan also pointed out that the BRICS group, which is strongly supported by China, is primarily aimed at challenging US influence. Trump's comments were aimed at undermining China's efforts to build anti-American alliances internationally. The key question is now how India, which is both a founding member of BRICS and a close US ally, will respond. India has often managed to balance its relations with both sides, but Trump's hardline stance may put India in a difficult position. Other countries considering joining BRICS might now reconsider their decision. Currently, the BRICS group represents 45% of the world's population and accounts for 35% of global economic output, with China contributing more than half of BRICS' total economic size. Professor Robert Schreiber from the University of Cape Town believes that BRICS symbolizes a rejection of the Western leadership model, but its economic impact remains limited. The BRICS countries are very different in terms of economy, culture, and politics. For example, the UAE's GDP per capita is 50 times higher than Ethiopia's. Brazil, India, and South Africa have democratic elections, while China and Russia are seen as authoritarian. On security, India is a key US ally in the Indo-Pacific, while China and Russia are at odds with the West. Brazil and South Africa's current governments are pro-CCP. China wants to turn BRICS into a global forum to counter the influence of the US and EU. It has pushed to expand BRICS, with countries like Saudi Arabia joining, but even Brazil and India resist this expansion to maintain their influence. China has also led efforts within BRICS to promote de-dollarization. The US dollar is still the dominant currency in global trade, but many BRICS members are tired of America's control over the global financial system. Countries in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and even Europe are considering or implementing de-dollarization plans, with Russia particularly pushing for a new payment system to bypass Western sanctions. Chinese media have reported that more and more countries across regions, from Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East to Europe, and the Asia Pacific, are planning or have already implemented de-dollarization strategies. However, the countries mentioned are mostly developing nations, and the reference to Europe specifically points to Russia and its allies, including Belarus and other former Soviet states. Brazil's government announced in 2023 that it had reached an agreement with Beijing to stop using the US dollar as an intermediary currency, opting instead to settle trade in their own local currencies. Similarly, Argentina declared it would no longer use the dollar to pay for Chinese imports, switching to the Chinese yuan for trade settlement. However, after the election of Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, the country quickly reverted to relying on the dollar to stabilize the Argentine peso's exchange rate. Russia has been particularly active in pushing for the establishment of a new payment system to replace the global banking network SWIFT, allowing Moscow to bypass Western sanctions and continue trade with its partners. At the October BRICS summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the U.S. for weaponizing the dollar, calling it a huge mistake. The internal tensions between China and Russia in BRICS were evident as both countries vie for influence, especially in the global south or the developing world. Associate Professor of Diplomacy Zhangqin Mo at Taiwan's Tom Kang University argued that there is no genuine friendship between China and Russia. Rather, their cooperation is temporary and primarily aimed at challenging the U.S.-dominated international order. Although Russia holds the rotating presidency of the BRICS group, it seems that China is taking the lead. Both China and Russia are competing for influence within the so-called Global South, a term used to refer to developing countries. Zhang pointed out that in the global financial sector, Russia, currently under Western sanctions, is eager to establish a cross-border payment system as quickly as possible. However, China has its concerns. With deteriorating relations with both the US and the EU, China aims to create an international order led by Beijing that would be based on the interests of southern countries and serve as a counterbalance to the US. Former Goldman Sachs chief economist Jim O'Neill, who coined the term BRICS, told Reuters last month that the BRICS group had achieved little in the past 15 years. He emphasized that global issues cannot be effectively addressed without the involvement of the US and Europe. According to O'Neill, expanding BRICS to include more members would only make meaningful progress more difficult. O'Neill also noted that no country with the potential to challenge the US dollar has seriously attempted to do so. He reasoned that if these countries really wanted to address economic issues, they could have worked on reducing trade tariffs among themselves. O'Neill further stated that as long as China and India remain divided and refuse to cooperate on trade, the idea of BRICS challenging the dollar is unrealistic. Since the China-India border conflict erupted in 2020, India has sought to limit Chinese investment within its borders. In the days before the October BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, both India and China confirmed that they had reached an agreement on the China-India border conflict. China refused to reveal the specifics, only stating that their agreement mainly addressed patrol issues along their border. However, some Chinese military analysts believe that the truth is that China agreed to withdraw from two key outposts, with a total area of over 1,000 square kilometers. Following the 2020 border conflict, India had demanded that China pull back all troops that had crossed the line of actual control and restore the situation to what it was before April of that year. India's foreign minister expressed satisfaction with the recent withdrawal, saying it marked a return to the pre-2020 status quo. The reasons behind China's concessions are thought to be tied to its broader global strategy. Chinese military commentator Song Zhongping noted that the new agreement does not resolve all border disputes between the two countries. Many analysts believe China is trying to appease India to ensure its support for expanding the BRICS bloc and promoting de-dollarization. However, India remains cautious about both the independent payment system that China and Russia are pushing for, as well as the de-dollarization effect. India's stance on these issues remains one of the fundamental contradictions within BRICS. Professor Zhang explained that, beyond the territorial dispute, India and China are also competing for leadership in the global south. India, in particular, seeks a larger role in the United Nations Security Council. While India has political and economic ties with the West and is a key ally in the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, it also maintains neutral relations with Russia on issues like the Ukraine war, and it refrains from directly supporting Russia. Zhang also pointed out that the relationship between Russia and India is closer than that between India and China, which could create significant challenges for future BRICS cooperation. Disagreements over key issues, such as a proposed cross-border payment system and the idea of a shared currency, as well as geopolitical coordination, will be difficult to reconcile. The day after both countries confirmed their agreement on military patrols, Indian Finance Minister announced India would continue to impose restrictions on investments from neighboring countries, particularly China. After Trump's tweet warning of 100% tariffs for BRICS countries, some Indian experts suggested that the Modi government should take the warning seriously and start paying more attention to the situation. In the joint Kazan Declaration, there was no mention of the issue of the US dollar's global dominance, which Russia had often raised during its chairmanship. There was also no mention of a single currency or cryptocurrency for BRICS countries. Instead, the declaration emphasized the use of local currencies in trade among BRICS members and their trading partners. This shift in focus is widely seen as a recognition that the ambition to challenge the dominance of the US dollar has faltered. During the BRICS summit, Russia also requested that participating countries bring their own hard currencies, such as US dollars, in cash, as sanctions have made it difficult for international credit cards to be used in Russia. Al Jazeera's commentary noted that BRICS' path to challenging Western hegemony is long and fraught with obstacles. The legitimacy of the organization is questioned, especially with Putin facing an international arrest warrant due to the Ukraine war. Additionally, internal divisions exist, with many countries seeking membership not because they want to oppose the US, but because they are attracted to China's financial and technological influence. China has long promoted the internationalization of the yuan, and the idea of the yuan replacing the US dollar has gained some traction. However, in practice, the yuan's share of global foreign exchange reserves has declined in recent years, dropping from a peak of 2.8% in 2022 to around 2.3% now. Professor Ye Yao Yuan from the University of St. Thomas in the US argues that the possibility of the yuan replacing the US dollar system is very low. He points out that many countries are skeptical about the yuan's value. Initially, Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative aimed to integrate developing countries into the yuan's market, but this effort has largely failed. The idea of the yuan gaining more influence through cooperation with the Russian ruble is also unrealistic, given that the ruble is heavily sanctioned by Western countries and can only be used within Russia. China's current financial situation is also under pressure. On October 23rd, the Wall Street Journal reported that up to $254 billion US dollars may have illegally flowed out of China in the year leading up to June 30th, 2023. People are resorting to old methods to circumvent government controls, such as shipping valuable goods overseas, setting up companies abroad, or buying up domestic companies. Much of this money has flowed into Europe, the US, Japan, and Australia, with many wealthy Chinese moving to countries like Japan and Singapore, where they are buying real estate. Professor Zhang notes that BRICS countries have long hoped to create a common currency similar to the euro, and even China has tried to promote the petro-yuan to challenge the dollar's dominance in oil trade. However, this has faced significant difficulties. Apart from the dollar's widespread use, China is also dealing with economic downturns, capital outflows, and a banking system under significant threat. The world is closely watching when China's financial crisis might erupt. Moreover, other BRICS countries lack the political stability needed for economic integration. Turning to the US trade war, Trump's use of tariffs to warn BRICS countries is just part of the broader trade strategy. Prior to officially starting his second term, Trump made it clear that he would impose new tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada to force them to curb illegal immigration and drug trafficking. On the first day of his second term, Trump planned to sign an executive order imposing a 25% tariff on all goods from Mexico and Canada and a 10% tariff on products from China. Trump has previously suggested a 60% tariff on China, but if, for example, China were to invade Taiwan, he said he would increase the rate to 100% or even 200%. This strong tariff policy threatens China's economic growth. Experts believe the goal is to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China, bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., and help create more jobs for Americans. In November 2023, the China-Peru Cooperation Project at Chancay Port in Peru held its opening ceremony, and Trump's transition team responded by announcing a 60% tariff on goods entering the U.S. through this port. The U.S. Department of Commerce announced on November 29th that it would impose tariffs of up to 271% on solar panels imported from Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, 4 Southeast Asian countries that have become major exporters of solar products. These panels are considered a green product that China has been dumping globally, leading to tariffs on both Europe and the US to curb the practice. In September 2023, several US lawmakers sent a letter to President Biden urging him to prevent Chinese manufacturers from evading US tariffs by setting up factories in countries like Vietnam and Malaysia. Due to Trump's high tariff threats, the Chinese yuan has been weakening. In November 2023, the yuan's exchange rate against the dollar dropped by 1.64%. Global investment banks predict that the yuan will hit a historic low, with the offshore yuan expected to reach an average of 7.51 to 1 US dollar by the end of 2025. This would mark the lowest level since 2004, with some predictions even more pessimistic, suggesting the yuan could fall to 8. Economists warn that such a significant devaluation of the yuan could exacerbate China's capital outflows and disrupt its financial markets.